Welcome to the Way of the Wealthy Witch. I'm Afira Nefertiti Farid, your guide for taking your life and biz from mundane to magical AF. I'm an expert on how to use esoteric laws, intuitive techniques, and universal cycles to manifest your most enchanted life through witchcraft and self-development. I'm a full-time biz witch, and it's literally my job to help you identify your highest path, manifest your fairy tale dreams, and alchemize your biggest perceived weaknesses into your greatest superpowers. This podcast is your source of wisdom on how to balance those woo-woo witchy vibes with the tried and true strategies that'll help you slay your goals. If you're a mystic maven who's ready to go from grimoires to Gucci belts, then you have come to the right place. Let's manifest your ideal wealthy witch lifestyle. Let's make some magic. Here we go. Welcome back to Way of the Wealthy Witch. It's Afira here, the Wealth Witch, and this week I am spilling all of the beans about this crazy manifesting challenge that I have been doing for just about the past 2 years now. So a lot of the time people ask me, like, how did I manifest so much in a relatively short amount of time? And I don't just mean material things. Obviously, I manifested my dream apartment and severely up-leveled my income and just have started collecting all of the things that I've ever wanted, kind of. But I also mean on a personal level, because way before the physical results actually started to be noticeable, people were noticing that my energy was changing and my decision style was changing and my attitude and my outlook on life and the way I connected with other people and the way I connected with myself. All of those things were changing for the better in really dramatic ways. And I just wanted to actually come forward and explain exactly what I did. And it's really, really simple, to be really honest with you. I can give you as many details as I can remember, but all you really need to know is that I made a simple decision. I basically decided that for however long, I think I decided it was going to be one moon cycle to start with, I was going to make every single decision using my pendulum. So I'm going to tell you the whole story, at least as much as I can remember, because it's been a wild ride. But first things first, I just wanted to let you know, in case for some reason you just haven't heard, this episode of Way of the Wealthy Witch, just like every episode of Way of the Wealthy Witch, is brought to you by my Elemental Alchemy meditation bundle, which is a set of 6 guided meditations narrated by yours truly, which help you to get in touch with the esoteric meanings of the elements earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, and start channeling your intentions through those elements so that you too can start manifesting crazy results. One of the most basic and simple ways to get started and actually start getting results without having to do all of the crazy esoteric research and all the crazy guinea pig stuff that I do to myself is you can simply start meditating with the elements. Trust me, it will change your freaking life. So if you want to know more about that, or if you want to hear about results that other people have gotten, go to the link below. As a podcast listener, you are getting $11.11 off. So it's normally $44.44, but you are getting it for $33.33 at the special link below. So go ahead and check that out. Okay, guys, let's get into this amazing story. So first things first, where was I at and why did I make the decision to start making all of my decisions using a pendulum? Well, I kind of had just started to make the shift between that like starving artist lifestyle that I had been living for most of my life into kind of having more of an abundance mindset. This was when I started getting business and lifestyle coaching, and when I started actually charging for the magic classes that I used to teach on my blog for free. And I was transitioning out of my product-based business of creating handmade journals and into a service-based business, which just was a lot more exciting and was a lot more in alignment with what my soul felt like it needed to do. But it was kind of a scary time because since so much about my outlook on life and my prospects for the future was changing, along with just dealing with people in new ways that I wasn't used to, like being a mentor and being mentored by someone else, and, being in group programs with other mastermind people, and, just also having to manage a much larger following than what I was accustomed to. All of those things were kind of super outside of my comfort zone. And I found myself constantly feeling like kind of confused, because I was obviously receiving coaching, but I was receiving coaching from quite a few different coaches. So I have a couple of coaches, and by a couple, I mean 2 to 3, that I always go back to for certain things. But at the time, I wasn't quite sure like whose strategy I liked for which part of my life and business. So I was receiving all like different insight from different directions, and that was confusing. And then I was so open-minded at the time, like just trying to open my mind to new things and a new concept of life, that I was listening to even more than just those 3 coaches. I was listening to just people online and just like everything that I saw that seemed to be somewhat in alignment with the new path I was on. I would try to implement all of it, and it just got very overwhelming. And so I decided I needed to really get back in touch with my own intuition as I was navigating the waters of these like new territories that I was trying out. And this was really, really important to me because, to be honest, something that held me back for years in my magical journey and also my entrepreneurial journey and, my manifesting journey is that I'm an Aquarius. I'm a rebel. I really do not like being told what to do. And it's not even just from like an ego place of like, I'm a rebel. No one can tell me what to do. It's also because there's a very intrinsic part of my soul's calling, I guess, that has to process things through my own intuitive compass, so to speak. So even if something seems like a great idea right away, I've just learned that my energy deals with things differently than some other people's, and I have to make sure that it's actually aligned with me and who I am before I implement it. Otherwise, all kinds of things can just not go according to plan. And part of what triggered me to make this decision to start working with the pendulum so closely was that I realized that I was manifesting some experiences that could have been avoided. So, for example, there was a time when I was in a group on Instagram where it was myself and some other women who I had been in a group program with, and in order to help like get our followings going and make sure that the algorithm was actually showing people our things on Instagram, we would go and we would like and comment on each other's posts when they came out. But there were just some guidelines for how the group was supposed to work so that it was fair for everyone in the group. And someone in the group just didn't seem to be getting it and didn't seem to be following the rules. And so when somebody brought this to my attention, I was like, oh, I'm sure it's no big deal. She just doesn't understand. I'll just go and talk to her and everything will be fine. But when I went and messaged her, she freaked the fuck out and like just started blaming me and pointing the finger at me and saying I was a horrible person and just saying these terrible things. And I was like, wow, that is nuts. Like, I don't normally attract drama. Like, that's not something that's normal for me. So clearly, like, I believe everything that happens in the universe is a mirror of something that you need to learn or understand or just make sense out of within yourself. And so I did a ton of shadow work around that, and I realized a lot of things that we don't have to go into in this episode, but one of the just core lessons of that experience was double check before you do something that it's actually in alignment with what you want to happen. Because I believe that there's really no mistakes, because as long as you're constantly learning and you're getting closer and closer to understanding what it is that you do want through contrast, nothing is really a waste. But at the same time, if you kind of have specific intentions and you don't want to be wasting your time and energy learning everything the hard way unnecessarily, you really want to start getting more clear about your intentions and having a surefire system of navigating as directly as possible to what it is that you want instead of getting caught up in other drama. And so what I had to realize was that that person was not capable of handling my style of communication, and it also happened that she was going through a really hard time in her personal life that I wasn't aware of, so I kind of just caught her on the wrong day. And I also at the same time period was learning about human design. Basically, human design is like a personality type categorizing system, but it's based on astrology as well as the chakra system. So it's like very like energy oriented, and it's about how your energy connects with other people's energy, and there's a strategy involved. So if you are a projector like me, it means that the best way to communicate with people is to either respond to some kind of energetic invitation from them, or to give them the opportunity to respond to an energetic invitation from me. And at the time, I didn't really know that, or like I maybe had heard about it but wasn't paying attention to it. And like one of the things that is known to happen with projectors, if they're not paying attention to that, is people can think that they're like a know-it-all, or that they're like being rude, or that they're like butting in where they shouldn't, or like people just get really butthurt, I guess you could say, when projectors try to insert their 2 cents without getting like an energetic invitation. So basically what I learned from that experience was that I needed a way of checking in with my energy and just kind of checking in with the energy around a situation before taking action, just so that I understand what kind of territory I'm getting myself into. And so I kind of like was processing that, and I was processing some other stuff. And that same week, or the week after that, I actually kind of got into a little bit, I don't want to call it an argument, but just a really like funky communication with one of my mentors, where she was saying that it sounded like I was shooting down all of her ideas. And I just got really like triggered by that, because I was like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm trying all these new things and I'm trying to process all of this stuff. And it sounds like you're trying to tell me that if I don't instantly listen to what you say and implement it before running it through my own process, then there's something wrong with me. And, you know, it turned out that we actually just weren't on the same page about communication, and we ended up working it all out and it was fine. But that situation, immediately following the situation with the girl in the Instagram group, just kind of really culminated. And what I realized was that one of my core values and like core things that I am proud of about myself is that I always run everything through my own intuitive guidance system. I am not somebody who has blind faith in anything that anyone says. I'm open-minded, and I'm excited to hear people's opinions and people's ideas and to potentially implement them, but I'm not somebody who's just going to like instantly take somebody's word at face value without checking to make sure that I have a level of experiential faith with it, or that my energy is aligned with it for me. And so lo and behold, the following week I was taking a shower. And you know what they say, you get all your best ideas when you're in the shower. I think maybe it's a water element thing, like you're showering yourself with intuitive waters or something. I don't know. Anyway, I was in the shower and I had this ridiculous idea that was like, I remembered having a dream years ago about Jack Sparrow's compass. Now, those of you guys who are nerds like me and you're obsessed with Pirates of the Caribbean, you know what I'm talking about, where Jack has this little compass, but instead of pointing north, it points towards what you desire, or it points towards like whatever's going to get you to your desire, like whatever the next step is in finding your way to your desire. And years ago, I had a dream about that. And like, I dreamed that I just, in a moment of genius, figured out how to rig something together that was really simple, that basically made that compass. And then I woke up and I was like, damn it, I wish I could remember what I had made, or like how I had made that. And then I kind of wrote it off as like, that's ridiculous. I guess that was just a dream. There's no way that you could have a tool that easily points you in the direction of what you desire. But I always kept it in the back of my mind. So, fast forward years and years later, I'm in the shower, I'm going through all this stuff, and then just it suddenly clicks. And I was just like, what if that contraption that I dreamed of was pretty much like the same concept as using a pendulum? And then I had this amazing idea. I was like, oh my gosh, what if I just did a challenge for myself where for the next moon cycle, or 28 days from new moon to new moon, I consult my pendulum every single time that I'm at a crossroads, big or small. So what do I mean by that? I don't mean that every single second of every single day before doing anything at all, I have to ask my pendulum. Like if it's something simple that like I already know my energy is aligned with, like making a certain thing for breakfast or whatever, if it's something that's just a part of my routine and I don't feel like my intuition is prompting me to question it, then that's fine. But what I mean is every time that I found myself kind of sitting there scratching my chin, like, oh, should I do this or should I do that? I would pull out my pendulum for that. And oh my gosh, you guys, it was meant to just be a moon cycle, but here we are about 2 years later. And I still do this practice consistently. And I want to say, like, I have this practice to thank for pretty much everything that I've manifested internally as well as in the outside world. So that being said, let's talk a little bit more about what a pendulum is and how it works. And then I'll go into a little bit more about my story of like what has happened since I made that decision. So first things first, what is a pendulum? Essentially, a pendulum is just like a heavy charm or like object on the end of a string or a chain. That's pretty much it. So like most people outside of the magical community have heard the term pendulum talking about like a grandfather clock, which has like that pendulum that goes back and forth. Basically, a pendulum is just a name for this type of contraption that is consisting of these elements. In the magical world, of course, a pendulum is a very specific type of tool that is used for divination. So my divination practice is not to connect with spirits. It's not to connect with gods and goddesses. It's not for any of that really woo-woo kind of stuff. Honestly, my entire magical path and my entire intuitive practices and all of that is primarily focused on tapping into the part of myself that I call the higher self, which is the part of me that is free of like ego perspective and is only in tune with the greatest good of all. So that's who I channel anytime that I'm doing a divination practice. And so the way that this works is it requires a certain level of like suspension of disbelief. So there's a science part of it, and then there's like a spiritual woo-woo side of it. So the spiritual part of it is essentially you just have to have a belief that your higher self is connected to your subconscious mind and can communicate with you through your subconscious mind, like through your instincts. That's where kind of the concept of intuition comes from. And so it's kind of like what people say, like if you feel a gut feeling, that means you need to pay attention to what's going on because your intuition and your instincts are part of what's communicating with you to help you understand what's going on in the outside world. It's a similar concept, only you're just using a tool to get a little bit more clarity on like what those intuitive feelings are. So basically, you are going to like imagine that my elbow is on a firm surface like a table. I like to just stabilize myself with a table so that I'm not like wobbling all over the place and I can get like a clear reading. But basically what you do is you ask your higher self to communicate with you through your pendulum. And, assuming that your higher self is nested in your subconscious mind sends micro movements through your body and into your hand. and it will make the pendulum move in certain directions based on whatever you're asking. So you want to establish what the directions mean. So when I first started, I had to ask my higher self, what does yes look like? And for me, let me see if I can even get it to work without my hand being on the table. So show me yes. So it goes clockwise. Show me no. It goes counterclockwise. Show me it could go either way. And it goes back and forth horizontally. Show me not necessarily / ask a different question. And it goes back and forth vertically. So that's what it means for me. It might be different directions for you, so you want to make sure you establish that at the beginning. Unless you go through like some kind of major energetic shift that particularly ends up affecting this concept, your direction should stay consistent once they're established. So I have never had my pendulum do anything for yes besides clockwise, or anything, for no besides counterclockwise. Sometimes it does get a little funky. Like sometimes I'll notice that it's barely moving at all and I can't seem to get an answer. And usually what that means is it always means the same thing. It means that I need to clear out my energy because I am just so conflicted or have so much like just funky energy or like nervousness or whatever it is, or maybe it's too many different people's opinions in my ear that like I am at a standstill. So the reason I said it's one of two things is because I was going to say it could mean that you just need to clear your pendulum using like sage or whatever you tend to use to like energetically clear things. But I took that back because, to be really honest, me being a psychological witch, I feel like saging something really pretty much just helps me to clear out my mind and puts my mind back into the program of feeling like I'm clear, and that's how I believe that works. But if you're somebody who has a lot of stock in the herbs and crystals and stuff that you use having intrinsic value, then yeah, like just saging it or putting it with a cleansing crystal or something like that will get it working again. So that's my little mini pendulum tutorial. But yeah, so let's get into how this worked, how this whole thing worked for me. So like I said, I told myself that for one moon cycle, I was going to listen to my intuition via the pendulum to the exclusion of all else. And that was kind of scary at first because it's like, well, what if it's wrong? Like, what if the pendulum actually doesn't work? Or like, what if, just all the what ifs but what it was really at the end of the day was it was me questioning my intuition. It was me not being sure if my intuition really worked or if my intuition was always going to give me the answer that I wanted and that sort of thing. And when I realized that there was fear there and that I wasn't fully trusting myself, then I was like, okay, well now I have to do it just to prove to myself, that I can trust my intuition. And, I do, I trust it. So even though it was a scary decision, I went forward with it. And I don't even know what happened in the first month because it's just been one continuous story since then. But I can give you some examples of things that have been processed through this method in the past year or two that I've been doing this. Obviously, I felt really confident about it after that first month because I kept doing it consistently. So one example would be signing up for coaching programs. Like I love always having some level of support or being in a mastermind or having a coach. I think it's just extremely important, not only for business and, having somebody who knows what they're doing in business to help you from always doing trial and error, but also just for the companionship of it, especially someone like me who is a total solopreneur. I literally work by myself in this room, and sometimes I even kick the cats out because they're annoying. So like just being around other people who get it and who understand the journey is an extremely important aspect for me. So That being said, though, coaching can be very, very expensive, especially good coaching, or especially the coaching that I've wanted to do, because, like I said, I connect with certain mentors, and one mentor is not equal to another. So it's not a thing of like, oh, well, this other person has a cheaper program, so I'll just get the same thing from them. Like, it really doesn't work that way. You have to be working with people that you feel connected to for the right reasons. And so that being said, like, there were times when I was doing that transition between the starving artist life and the abundant life where my ego was flaring up big time around the money fears. Especially, for example, I had been doing a coaching program that was like $300 a month. And then when I started working with another coach, I was doing both programs. So I was paying about $600 a month for coaching. And that just seemed ridiculous to me because I had never allowed myself to invest in myself like that. I only ever invested in like the bare bones basic survival needs for myself, and the only time that I would splurge at all was usually just to pour more money into some aspect of my business, but not in that capacity. So like, my ego was freaking out, just like, oh my gosh, like, what if we can't pay for this stuff? Like, what if you're just getting sucked into some kind of a scheme and you're going to become addicted to it and you're just going to lose all your money? Like, these are very real fears that come up, guys. Like, I know, I know, I've been through the whole thing. And that's the thing, though. Like, what I believe the pendulum does, at least in my practice with the intention that I put into it, is it helps you distinguish whether you are making a fear-based decision or a love-based decision. And again, one of my core values is that the purpose of life and the purpose of like living a quote unquote positive life is just always making love-based decisions instead of fear-based decisions. I believe that if everybody only ever made purely love-based decisions, there would be no problems in the world. But the ego is there for a reason. It's there for self-preservation so that we can have this human experience. So it's important that it's there and that we're working with it in some regard, but we just need to make sure that at the end of the day, it's the higher self that is in the driver's seat and not the ego. And so what my pendulum helps me to do is understand the difference between my ego trying to make me make a fear-based decision versus my higher self trying to get me out of my comfort zone to make a love-based decision. And sometimes there's just fear that comes up either way. So it helps you to navigate through fear. So going back to the example with coaching programs, when one of my coaching programs ended, I was presented the opportunity to join a mastermind that was going to be $1,000 a month, and I was already paying for other programs for other stuff as well. And it just seemed completely absurd for me to be paying over $1,000 a month for a coaching program. I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. I couldn't like justify it. But I just kept thinking about it and being like, well, I really like, what's going to be included in this, and I really want to work with this person, and I really want to be in this group. Like, I feel like there's some expansive energy around that, but it just isn't possible, quote unquote, it isn't possible for me financially. It isn't practical, was what my mind kept telling me. And so I used my intuitive techniques for that. So I started off. It's so funny how this happened because I thought it was going to be a simple yes or no question. I was just like, higher self, should I sign up for this $1,000 coaching program? And I assumed that it was just going to say, no, that's ridiculous, and just, give me a no. But it actually kind of gave me, I think it either gave me a maybe or a yes. I think it might have even given me a yes. And I was just so taken aback by that I was like, no way, there's no way that's right. So I asked it again, like in all these different phrases or like all different types of questions, basically asking the same thing. And it always kept saying yes, like look into this more. So then I ended up doing like a whole tarot reading, and I like annoyed the crap out of my coach, asking her 1,200 questions about what was included and like just trying to wrap my head around it. And in the end, my pendulum was right, and it was something that I was supposed to do. And, I've been working with this mentor ever since. And, I feel like that is a huge reason why I've been able to have the success that I've had. So Like that's a big scary an example of like a big scary decision. Another example is just like shopping decisions for smaller things sometimes. So like some days I would ask, because I was so broke at the time, a lot of the time back then, I would ask something like, is it aligned for me to like buy myself a new t-shirt, or should I save this money for a rainy day? And you can get simple answers like that. And what's really cool about it is it's not just like the satisfaction of your higher self saying yes, buy the t-shirt. Like it's not just that instant gratification of like getting the t-shirt or not getting the t-shirt. It's about what that decision represents in the grand scheme of your soul's journey. So, for example, when I first started the Pendulum Challenge, I did spell work around it and I had a very specific intention. My intention was always, again, to be leading with love instead of with fear, but specifically, I wanted to become a wealthy, wise witch. And what that means to me, the wealthy part of it is being financially supported and being supported by the earth element enough that you are able to be your true and full expression of yourself. Because when you don't have enough, you are in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you're being led by fear-based decisions. And when you're being led by fear-based decisions, you're not able to be the ideal version of yourself who is creating what they're meant to be creating in the world and having compassion for themselves and for others and, being creative and all of that. So, and then the wise part of it, again, is just like having wisdom and having compassion, knowing what people want and what people need and what's good for me and what's good for people and like all of that sort of thing. And then which, of course, just taking energetic responsibility for the direction of your life and manifesting what you want. So that was my decision. That was what I basically programmed the pendulum with the intention of. Something as big and obvious as joining a certain coaching program, obviously that makes sense. It's like, duh, this is something that's going to help me become witchier, wealthier, and more wise. But for something as simple as like buying a t-shirt, it's not just the t-shirt, it's the symbol of what that means in the grand scheme of things. So for me, for example, buying a t-shirt instead of saving that money for a quote unquote rainy day or just getting the bare survival needs, that represented me being at a new level of abundance where I was able to treat myself. And that was something that I just never got to do previously. So that purchasing of that t-shirt set the precedent that I was allowed to have more than just the basics, that I was allowed to express myself more through fashion again, that I was allowed to not have to do a crazy amount of shadow work and decide what it means in the like grand scheme of the universe and what it has to do with, people on all corners of the globe, every time that I'm getting ready to just decide if I'm going to gift something to myself, because I always made everything complicated before that. I was like, is it economically safe to make this decision? Does this have to do with like politics? Like, where is this? What is this supporting? What is this? Blah, blah, blah. And those are all really good questions. But if you're in analysis paralysis 100% of the time and you're constantly in this like fear-based mentality of like feeling like every little decision is going to make or break you or like has this huge amount of responsibility on your shoulders, you're just not going to get anywhere, and you're not going to be empowered to actually help the world in the ways that you are equipped to do, because you're just going to be stuck under a pile of confusion. So that kind of represented me just being able to make easier aligned decisions for myself without feeling like I needed to intellectually make sense out of it. I was able to intuitively trust that I was making the right decision and not have to ask 1,200 questions. So that just kind of set that precedent that like here we are today where like I'm always gifting myself with new things. I'm always improving my material wealth. I'm always just making fashionable choices and stuff like that, and giving myself way more than the bare bones basics and encouraging other people to do so for themselves. So I hope that makes sense. It's just like an example of how little or big decisions can be in direct alignment with that. So, another thing that I wanted to point out with the pendulum, though, because I did say that I would go through the good, the bad, and the ugly with you guys. So, those are kind of examples of the good. Like, those were times when I got what I, consciously believed that I wanted. But the thing about listening to your intuition to the exclusion of all else, whether you're using a pendulum or some other divination technique, is that sometimes your higher self is going to push you into situations that your conscious mind and or your ego are just not too excited about. Because when you have a higher vision for yourself and you make that deal with the universe that you're going to do whatever it takes in order to get to that result, then it means you're going to have to get outside of your comfort zone. And anytime that you desire anything, it's because you have to get outside of your comfort zone. Because if if the thing you wanted was in your comfort zone, you'd already have it. So in order to get it, you have to do new things. You have to put yourself in new circumstances, new situations. You have to start thinking a different way, making different kinds of decisions. And that can be freaking terrifying to the ego. So, for example, like just a really juicy one, I guess, like from my personal life is earlier this year, I had to get out of a 2.5-year relationship. And, I guess it was my ego or like my conscious mind or whatever, just really did not want to do that. Like, there was a part of me that felt like ending that relationship would be like the end of the world, even though like I knew my higher self knew better than that. And I knew that I would, bounce back, and that if it wasn't meant to be, something better, some better experience would replace it. But, when you're just in something like that, in one of those very emotional situations, it's almost like there's a part of you that'll do anything than have to face the thing that you don't want to face. But, lo and behold, when a situation arose that I was like, this is kind of a make or break moment, what did I do? I whipped out my pendulum, and I think I also ended up doing a tarot reading as well, but I use my tarot and my pendulum together now. So, for example, say I'm doing a reading, instead of just assuming that I've gotten what I was meant to get out of the cards, because you can easily twist, a tarot reading to believe what you want it to believe. What I actually do is, if there's even a shadow of a doubt as to whether I interpreted it in, my highest capacity, I'll just hold my pendulum and I'll ask, higher self, did I get everything that I was meant to get out of this particular card? And it'll say yes or no. If it says yes, I'll say, okay, am I free and clear to move on to interpret the next card in the spread? And then it'll say yes, and then I'll move on. But sometimes it'll say no. It'll say blatantly like, no, there's something that you're missing. So I'll be like, okay, well, have I interpreted it correctly so far? And then say it says yes. And it's like, okay, so my current interpretation of it is correct, but that just means that I need to dig even deeper and find even more meaning in it. So I'll just keep paying attention to what comes up for me around that card, and I'll keep asking yes or no questions until ultimately my pendulum says, yes, you've gotten everything you were meant to get out of this card, and you're free to move on to interpret the next one. So yeah, like that's an example of a big scary thing that I really didn't want to do that. I really didn't want to break up with that partner, and it was extremely painful. But my higher self said that I had to do it, and so I did it. And I just, even though it was excruciatingly painful at the time and remained to be for a few weeks after that, even in the darkest moments, I knew that I was making the right decision, and I had a sense of comfort around that, and even a sense of excitement. Even though I wouldn't let myself feel excited because I was too busy feeling sorry for myself, there was a part of me that felt excited for just the possibilities that opened up to me through making that decision. And so, obviously, I am quite sure that there is a much better person out there for me, but currently, I'm not even looking for that person actively, because I have just received so much personal power and so much just of an energy shift myself after not being in that relationship anymore. And, my career has improved, my friendships have improved, my home situation has improved, just everything has improved. And especially just the way I feel energetically, I just feel so much freer and healthier and happier, and like the world is mine. Just because I'm not in the confines of some of just the negative paradigms that were a part of the dynamic of that relationship. So yeah, guys, that's kind of it in a nutshell. But yeah, like, just if you're ever wondering, like, oh, how did she manifest this? Or how did she come to that decision? Or like, why did she change her business plan? Or whatever it is, you can pretty much bet your bottom dollar that it was simply like me feeling like a change needed to be made, or like a new type of decision needed to be made around something big or small. And I just asked my pendulum, I said, higher self, would it be ideal for me to do blah, blah, blah? And then just go from there. So I highly recommend doing this. Like, seriously, we're about to have a new moon this week. If you're watching this the week it comes out, maybe for the new moon, like, do a ritual and, just state to yourself and to the universe what your ultimate goal is. You don't even have to know exactly what it's going to look like. So for example, when I said I wanted to be a wealthy, wise witch, I didn't exactly know, that it was going to look like me upgrading to a certain apartment and then, changing my business model, or, buying a whole new wardrobe. Like, I couldn't have known exactly how it was going to look. Obviously, visualizing to the best of your ability is great, but just understanding what your core values are and what type of energy you want to bring into your life. You can do a ritual around that, get yourself a pendulum, and establish that for the next moon cycle. So from this new moon to the next new moon, you're going to do an experiment. You're going to listen to your higher self to the exclusion of all else via your pendulum, and just see what happens, guys. See what changes for you. Like I said, I started off doing it for a month, and here we are about 2 years later. So obviously, like, I went through a major shift during that first month. So I highly recommend that. I also am just really excited to let you know that if you want support in that, because I know it can be scary, and especially when you're somebody who is like starting a business, or you're trying to scale a business, or you're just making like big, uncomfortable shifts in your life with accordance to a particular mission that you're on. Sometimes it's just not good to do it alone. And even though I, didn't specifically have someone teaching me a course on how to use pendulums, one of the mentors that I was working with at the time was very, much familiar with pendulums. So, if I ever needed any support, I could go to her. But just this entire experience has inspired me to actually create an entire course around using divination to tap into your wealthy, wise witch self. And of course, as with all of my programs, it does have a business focus. So if you are launching, growing, or scaling your heart-centered online business, hit me up, because I have like an entire arsenal of specific rituals that I do with my pendulum, with my oracle cards, with my tarot cards, with automatic writing, that I use when I'm making certain types of business decisions, so that I know that my energy is directly aligned with the decisions that I decide to make in my business. So for example, say somebody comes to me asking to join a coaching program, and, I feel a little funky energy around it. I have a certain ritual that I go through in order to understand if that person is actually an aligned client to work with me. Another example, like I said, if I'm deciding if I'm going to join a program myself, or I'm going to join a mastermind, I have a specific ritual that I do to help me get a surefire answer of whether that mastermind is right for me, or that program, or whatever it is right for me. And yeah, it can be a thing of like, oh, this is going to be X amount of money, and I have no flipping idea where that's going to come from. But if my intuition says yes, then I know that the universe will send me that money from somewhere. It's just that simple. And I know that sounds crazy, but that is how I have gotten from a complete starving artist to this person who can literally, manifest practically. I don't even want to say practically. I can manifest anything. Obviously, it doesn't all happen instantly, but some of it does. So if that's something that inspires you, let me know. The program is called Divining Diva, and it is for all levels. So the basic version of it is for people who have maybe never even tried using Oracle or Tarot or Pendulum or any of that. And I teach you the whole thing from the focus of being your ideal wealthy witch self and, aligning that with your business decisions. And then the VIP version of it has even more in-depth rituals and spell work and all of that, specifically aligned with the different ins and outs and mechanics of what it takes to run a successful business. So let me know if you're interested in that, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, blessed be. Thanks for sitting for a spell with us. Ready to explore more of the Way of the Wealthy Witch? Come join the Rich Witch Revolution in our Way of the Wealthy Witch Facebook group, and follow the magic on Instagram at Afira Nefertiti. If this episode inspired you, please do share it with your witchy friends, and be sure to subscribe and post a review on iTunes so that we can spread the word that witches are taking over the world. Until next time, blessed be.